What is going on, my beautiful people? Welcome to yet again another episode of the Pivot Mindset Podcast. My name is Justin. I am your host, and I'm super excited to have you joining us on yet again another episode of the podcast. Listen, it doesn't matter where you are across this world. I'm super thankful that you have continually joined us in our endeavor to help people make life's pivots. Listen, this is a mission of mine that has become more and more important as I continue to develop, as I continue to learn, as I continue to get better on what it is to make life's pivots and what it is to make life's adjustments. And so, we believe here that life is all about those pivots, and those who decide to make those pivots decide to become successful. And so to get a little bit of housekeeping out the way, I just want to first ask that everyone that's listening to this episode, whether you're a repeat listener and somebody that's been committed to this community, committed to growing this community, I thank you. And I ask that you would just give this podcast a rating and review. And also, if this is your first time, if you stumbled upon this podcast, my name is Justin. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having us, allowing you to have your ears and being a part of what we're building here, and really helping out individuals, entrepreneurs, and people that are really just trying to get out of their comfort zone, really trying to take their life to the next level. And I believe to do that, it requires us to continually pour in to our development and pour into what it takes to be successful. And so in this episode, I'm super excited to jump in. In this episode, we're going to talk about timing. Timing is of the essence. Timing is super important, but more so than more specifically than timing, and how timing always sucks. All right. I'm going to give you the permission in this episode to understand and know that timing always sucks. Like when it comes to making the important decisions in your life, timing is one of those things that doesn't matter how much money you've got, doesn't matter how many moves you've made in life. I've realized and also, have read tons of books and have studied tons of people who have done tons of successful things in their lives. And what has come down to one of the lowest common denominators is what it is to do something in spite of timing, what it is to make the adjustments in life, what it is to take your life to the next level, what it is to become all that you know that you are called to be in spite of timing. All right. Because, a lot of us are often waiting for the perfect time. How many of you guys have heard that, right? Like how many of you have heard for someone to say, man, I'm just waiting for the perfect time to do this, and I'm just waiting for the perfect time to do that, or, I'm waiting for the economy to get better before I invest, or I'm waiting for, the Instagram algorithm to get better before I promote my business, or I'm waiting for me to lose weight before I start dating, right? How many of us are always thinking of how we're like trying to find and wait on the best time, right? And time sometimes seems to be fleeting, right? It's like it's this look forward to a time that hasn't yet arrived, but we have it on our mind that at some point there will be an ideal time to make the important decisions. Often when it comes to those simple decisions, right? Like, what time to eat, we can make the choice on the call, right? We could make the call on when it's time to eat. Or sometimes when it's simple decision on what shirt to wear, we can make that call, right? This is not for the easy decisions. This is normally for the hard decisions. And when it comes to the hard decisions that you're going to make in your life, 9 times out of 10, those hard decisions will have to be made in the non-ideal circumstances, in the non-ideal situations. And so in this episode, I want to really give you some keys and some strategies on how to make the adjustments and how to do things in spite of time, right? How to do things knowing that time is actually always going to suck. The timing of something is never going to be good. Man, I remember my wife and I, when we had our first son, Zane, and Zane is now 5 years old, but before he was born, when we were talking about the potential of having children, one of the things that we would do is before we had him, we were planning, and that meant we were building out our budget, making sure that our finances in order. We were paying down debt. We were trying to put ourselves in the position that when we had our son, that he would be able to be born in the ideal environment, in an ideal circumstance, right? And so what began to happen, though, what I realized was during this process, we were preparing so much around us. We were preparing financially, we were preparing emotionally. I know I had read a book or two. I'm sure my wife had read a couple of books. We had talked to other parents about their experiences of being parents and having newborns. And around us, there had seemed to almost be a lot of people that were having children, a lot of people that were, first time parents and kind of journeying into it ahead of us. And so we would use those, those people to ask questions, right? And to get feedback and hopefully get guidance, right? But in essence, what we were trying to do is we were trying to hedge as much as we could to prepare for what we expected God to do in our lives, and that was allow us to have a child. And one of the things that I remember talking to one of my mentors about, and it hit me, and it kind of like sent ripples through me, was he talked about children and how when you have children, how like there is no ideal time to have children. He's like, no matter when you have your children, no matter when you decide to have children, that children are storms. They're blessings. Don't get me wrong. Children are blessings, but children are also storms, and meaning that children, they mess up your schedule. They mess up your time. You got to build your entire life around them. You can't just get up and go like you normally would. You got to almost plan your day around their sleep schedule, so it's not like super uncomfortable and they're not crying in the middle of the mall, right? All that kind of stuff that you normally don't have to do before you have children. But when you got children, these are things that you practically and actively think through when it comes to how you go throughout your day. But the statement that he made of, the fact that children are like storms and there's really no perfect time to have a child. And when I understood that, really, and for me, it really took us having a child to realize, like, man, no matter how much we prepared, and get this, I've actually got another piece of this, is we actually, in the process of, during pregnancy, we had decorated the room for him. We had his name up on the wall. We had all his colors. We had the crib set up. We had the little nursery part set up. We had, teddy bears and books and a book corner. We had a full decked out room, thinking we're doing all that we could to prepare for our son. And us as newbies, as new parents, right? What actually happened was, once he was born, guys, like he actually never used that room. Coincidentally, like we actually moved out of that house before he ever used the room. So here it is. We did all of this work to prepare for the life of our son, and we did all this preparation, and we did all of this navigating and buying all of this stuff, just to the diaper genies, all this stuff, right? We bought all this stuff for our son, and come to find out that we ended up moving out of that house actually before he even was born. And so we prepared for something that we actually didn't even experience. We made all the adjustments. We made all the preparations because we wanted to do our best to make sure that the timing was as best, and that the time that we had him was ideal. But that is an example of the fact that, guys, like, no matter what you do in life, timing is always going to suck. For all the most important things, the timing is always going to suck when it comes to going ahead and doing what you're capable of, doing what you feel like you're called to do. Waiting for a good time to quit your job, like the stars will never align, and the traffic lights of life will never be all green at the same time. You will not have the ideal circumstance, all the stars aligning that will allow you to easily do something that's important. When it comes to taking a bet and taking risk on yourself and betting on yourself, you won't ever be in that position where all of the stars are going to completely align and everything seems to be perfect and ideal. There's going to be aspects of time and aspects of where you are that will not be ideal. But what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to walk through and actually have courage to feel that fear and do it anyway. Because someday the word someday will haunt you. And how many of you listening know people that it's always someday this, someday I'm gonna do that, someday I'm gonna go back to school, someday I'm gonna get wealthy, someday I'm gonna have my dream house, someday I'm gonna have my dream spouse, someday I'm gonna travel the country and do all this, right? People use someday as a way to tell their dreams to die. Like someday becomes the thing that just becomes the coffin of their dreams. And like one of the things that I want to encourage you to do, that one of the first pieces when it comes to understanding timing and knowing that no matter what timing looks like, you've got to be able to take the risk and take the jumps anyway, is that like remove someday out of your vocabulary. I believe there's two words that should be out of your vocabulary in 2022. The first word is realistic. Take that word out of your vocabulary because the life that you're trying to build is not going to be realistic. If you're really trying to live this pivoted life, it won't be realistic. You won't get permission from other people to accomplish this. People will not give you the acceptance or the permission to go ahead and be the best version of yourself and do what you're dreaming about. People won't give you that kind of permission. So I need you to remove realistic out of your vocabulary, and please remove the word someday out of your vocabulary, because someday, again, is often the coffin that we like to put our goals, our dreams, and our aspirations in. And we just package them there and hope that it'll preserve for someday, tomorrow, next year, next 3 years, in 10 years, I'm gonna do this, right? And so I wanna push you to stop thinking someday and stop always needing the time to be perfect and the circumstance to be ideal to make the best step and make the pivots in life. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of making a hard decision, or you've got multiple things that you're evaluating right now and you're trying to determine what do I use to make the best decision moving forward, what I want to encourage you to do is I want to encourage you to like understand that really like the ability to course correct doesn't leave you when you make that decision. So often, and this is something that we talk about often with the Pivot podcast, is that life doesn't have any like definite decisions. There's no decisions that you'll make once and it'll always be the thing that exists. And so all the decisions that you make, you will get the ability, unlike school, unlike tests that you'll take, all that kind of stuff. When you make a decision in life, you get the ability to make adjustments in those decisions, right? And so here's some practical things that I want you to begin to do when it comes to timing. And if you're struggling with with understanding the timing of what you're trying to do and finding the right time, is the first thing that I would say is I want you to create a pros and a cons list, right? And on the pros list, I want you to think of everything that would actually happen if you actually become successful at that thing, right? So maybe there's a business that you've always wanted to do and you've always wanted to start. And so I want you to create a pros list. What is the upside of you actually starting that business? What is the upside of the success that you would have? How does that make you feel? How much money would be in your bank account? How would you impact your community? I want you to get it very clear on the pros to actually doing that thing. But also on the other side of the paper, I want you to create a cons. And I want you to get very intense and very specific about the cons and the potential failures that you would experience if you did not actually accomplish it. What is the worst thing that could happen? What is the worst thing that you'll experience if you fail? What is the worst thing that would happen to you? And often what we realize is that in our minds, we're often overestimating and we're actually like romanticizing some failure or some fear that will never exist. I believe the stat is around 80% of our fears never actually come to truth, never come to fruition. And so I want you to measure both of those. Measure the pros. Measure what is the upside if I actually accomplish this. And then on the opposite side, what happens if I don't accomplish this? What would happen in my life if everything fell apart, right? If the business failed, get very detailed, because what will begin to happen, and I've done this and I've helped my clients work through this, is what will begin to happen is you'll realize that the true cons, the true downside isn't even close to as bad as you think it will be. And even if, for example, if the risk or the downside, the bad side happens, it won't take you anything or much to get back to where you were, right? Some of you may be at the point where you're like, man, maybe I feel like I need to quit my job, or man, I feel like I need to take this next step in my life. But you're afraid to. And weigh out the options. What's the worst that can happen? Truly. Like what's the worst that can happen? Because no matter what decision that you're in, it won't be a definite decision. Maybe you start the business and you go all in and you leave your job and now you're out like on your own. You're out on this island to try to fend for yourself. And maybe it doesn't happen the way you plan to. And maybe things do get tight. What's the worst that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is you will go back to a job market. You'll apply for another job and you'll go in one of the hottest like job markets that we've ever seen in the face of the planet, right? Everybody's hiring, people are leaving jobs and making tons of money and making way more money, right? The worst thing that can happen is you go back to safety. and you go back to the thing that has always been there. But what won't always be there is the window to actually walk through the dreams, the door being open to walk through and create the kind of life that you want. Those things won't always be there. And sometimes when it comes to opportunities, when it comes to things that we want, sometimes those things actually have shelf life. Those things sometimes can close on us. And it's not saying that that opportunity can't come back up. But when it comes to seizing a moment and seizing opportunity, you could be wasting one by your fear, and you could be holding yourself back. And here's the other piece. If I could do something now, why would I wait till later in life to delay the time that I could spend in like celebrating and living in the result? Let me break that down a little bit. Why would I push out what I want 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Because by that point, who's like in 3 years from now, if I take the action today, 3 years from now, I could actually have the very thing that I want and be living the exact life that I've always wanted to live and be able to enjoy that experience more. Or maybe I'll wait 5 years. Maybe I'll wait 10 years. And now I lessen the time that I actually get to spend doing the thing that I've always wanted to do. And guess what, guys? Tomorrow isn't promised. The circumstances isn't promised. Here's the other piece, right? Is we often almost think worst case scenario, right? We always think that. But if you can rewire your brain to always think positively, right? Always think from an optimistic standpoint. What would actually happen if my dreams are even small? What would actually happen if I actually accomplished way more than I thought I could? Because what will begin to happen is, like, especially when you begin to align your beliefs with the things that you want, what will begin to happen is, like, I believe that God will begin to attract people and attract scenarios and attract things into your life to help you take those next steps. God is the source, and he will provide and grant you resources, be able to take those next steps in your life and take those next steps in your business. As long as this is something that you feel that is something that God has called you to, and you feel like this is uniquely, your gift, your purpose, and your passion for right now on earth, I want to push you to take that next step, because the timing is always going to suck. The kids are always going to be in school. There's always going to be a big bill on the opposite side of your wrist. There's always going to be, you holding yourself back to do something. There's always going to be a better political time. There's always going to be a better economic time, right? Like it's always that next thing. But don't let that next thing stop you from taking the actual action now to move your business forward and move your life forward, no matter what that is. All right. And so this is your reminder that the timing is going to suck. All right. We're going to walk in that, right? The timing is not always going to be ideal for what you're trying to build. The timing won't always be the proper structure, and you won't always have the right resources and the best scenarios and the most people supporting you in that moment and the most followers, right? We always want to wait until the timing is perfect, but the timing will never be perfect. The timing will always be right, though. All right. And so that's what I'm going to leave you with on this episode. Remember, timing always sucks. And feel free to share this podcast, please, with your family, with your friends. If you're listening on Apple, on Spotify, please give this podcast a rating and review. If you're listening on YouTube, to my YouTube community, YouTube family, much love to you. Give this video a thumbs up. Feel free to drop a comment below, and I will answer it as soon as I can. And always remember that life is all about the pivots, and those who decide to make the pivots decide to become successful. Peace.